And there's actually research that talks about this thing called the multifaceted identity, I think is what it's called. And it means just having more in life. Like, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Like, have different focuses and priorities and kind of different parts of your life, so that the more faceted you are, the more you have to fall back on if one of those things goes away. So if cycling goes away, you can have your faith, you can have family, friends, maybe another hobby, just something. But if everything's in on cycling, then it'd be really hard for you to deal with a setback like that.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Stable Cyclist Podcast. I am so glad that you are here today, because of all the podcasts in the world that you could be listening to. You're right here with us, listening today to my conversation with Drew Dillman and I. And if you like what you hear today between Drew and I want to encourage you to share it with a friend, or take a screenshot on your phone while you're listening and share it on social media. And when you do that, make sure you tag us so we can keep the sharing train going. Today's podcast is brought to you by Flow Formulas. Whether you are training for a race or just training to be healthy in general, you want to fuel it right. And so I would recommend Flow Formulas Endurance Mix and Flow Formulas Recovery Mix. Also, their Gel Endurance Mix is superb, if I may say so myself. And when you fill up that cart of goodies to check out, use the code JohnPeter15 at checkout to get a little discount on that order. My guest today is Drew Dillman. He is, of course, probably right now well known mostly as a member of the Bonk Bros podcast, but he is also a professional gravel and mountain bike and crit and cyclocross racer. And this is his first year doing so as a privateer. And Drew and I are going to dive into all of that today and so much more. One last thing before we get Drew in here. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you could do us a favor and give us a 5-star rating, that would be fantastic. And if you can leave a review, that would be even better. If you're listening on Spotify, you can ask us a question in the Q&A section at the bottom of the page as well. And if you are watching all of this on YouTube, you can give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. All right. Enough of all that. Let's get Drew Dillman into the studio. Well, Drew Dillman, welcome to the Stable Cyclist Podcast. I actually should say to you, welcome back. You're technically our first returning person as Chase Wark and
I don't know.
Yeah, of course it counts. Yeah. Yeah, Chase and I, prank called you or cold called you or whatever you want to call it, but you are a part of Stable Cyclist lore at this point, and it's the most viral moment of the podcast. It's the most viral moment we've. Yeah, oh yeah.
What does it mean? What do you mean by viral? Give me some numbers.
Well, we got just on the story, the little short story on Instagram, and now this is viral relative to this show, but we've got like over 10,000 views of that short. Or that
nice.
reel, and you can rub this in Dylan's face if you want. You are now number one, and moved him to number 2 for the most viewed reel on this podcast. So yeah,
but that's more Chase than it is me. I mean,
sure.
I was just my name was in it.
Yeah, but you helped pass it around too. So yeah.
All right.
So for those that might be tuning in for the first time because they're like Dizzle disciples, Chase Wark was on my podcast a few weeks ago, and it was in person, so it was a lot easier to do this. But I had gotten Dizzle's phone number or Drew's phone number from Adam Sabin, and it was not like random. Adam and I have a relationship, so that wasn't weird for me to reach out and ask for that. And then we just cold called Drew mid-podcast and asked about the gravel beef, and we were really unsure if you would answer or call back because your wife had just had a baby the day before. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, you called us back, and it was incredible. So, yeah, talk us through it on your end of, like, getting this.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what was going on.
So actually, the day before, it would have been 1 a.m. on Thursday morning was when my wife delivered. At 8 p.m. on Wednesday night, so like literally 6 hours before my wife gave birth, I was at a short track mountain bike race. Like she called me when I was like on my way there because I had left a couple hours before the race to ride there, and she was like, I think I might be in early labor. And I was like, well, I'm already on the way to the race. Like, should I turn around or like, can I race and then come home? And she said, well, I think you'll be all right to like race and then come home. So somebody gave me a ride home after the race. We go to the hospital at like midnight. She gives birth at like 1 a.m. It was really quick, super smooth. She would even say it was like her dream birth, which is super cool. Way quicker than the first one, like way quicker, which is good. And then they were actually like short on rooms. And so it's quick. Like they had moved us from labor and delivery over to the mother baby unit within a couple hours. And then we were only in the hospital for 36 hours, which normally I think they keep you there for 48 hours just to make sure the baby is healthy and all that before they send you home. But like they needed our room, like they were out of rooms. And so they were like, yeah, you guys are healthy. Your baby's healthy. You guys can go home. But you guys called, I think the morning that we were leaving the hospital and we weren't really doing anything. But we were just sitting there waiting for them to come in and say, all right, y'all are like ready to go. But obviously there's like all kinds of people like that are coming in all the time. Like they do all these like random things to babies. Like the birth certificate person has to come in and ask you all these random questions about the birth certificate. And then some lady comes in to test her brain and make sure she can hear correctly. And I'm like, this is crazy. But you guys called right in a dead spot, but I didn't recognize the number, so I didn't answer it. And then I listened to the voicemail and was like, and I'm literally like in the chair holding my 1-day-old baby and was like, CJ, can I call them back? They want me to be on their podcast. And she was like, I don't care what you do. And I was like, all right, I'm calling them. So I called you guys back. And the whole time I was talking to Chase, I was just chilling with my baby on my chest. It was funny.
That's incredible. So what I really heard you just say is your wife might dog cuss me if I ever meet you or Chase for interrupting the time.
No. She's like, sometimes she's like, yeah, whatever. Like, but she used to race in college and she totally supports everything that I do. And, but the podcasts are a little outside of her realm. Like she doesn't listen to the Matchbox. She doesn't listen to Bonk Bros. She doesn't listen to any of the podcasts I do. It's just kind of funny. She's like, man, she's like, I already have to deal with you enough. I don't want to listen to you on a podcast. And I'm like,
that's how my wife feels too. And mine isn't as obnoxious as Bonk Bros. So I totally understand.
Yeah. I do have to go to her and say, hey, I may have said this on the podcast today. So, like just a heads up, like if somebody texts you or messages you or whatever, you're hearing it from me first.
Yeah. So Chase and I called you because like the term gravel beef, I don't know if it originated on the Bonk Bros pod or like if it's just a term that's been getting tossed around for a little while, but like the idea that there's an issue between two riders, and a lot of times we'll hear about guys after a race, or women for that matter, after these lifetime races where they're, of course with podcasts now, everybody airs their grievances pretty quickly. And you might, there's not a lot of guardedness in it anymore. And so people will kind of air things out. And then, especially you guys on your show, you have a huge platform and you'll be like, oh, there's gravel beef between these people. And so you and Chase kind of playfully, you were talking some trash a little bit ahead of Unbound. And then he came back with some amazing stuff. None of that was scripted in our phone call. And I think you said, oh, my eyes got kind of watery at the beginning, but it dried up real quick when he started talking trash to you.
Yeah. He went from like one moment like dogging me or like one moment giving me high praise and then like within the same sentence dogging me. And I was like,
yeah,
I could like, I don't know. I just love that. That's like so good.
it was savage, and I did not expect it. I had hung out for about 24 hours with Chase at that point, and I had not picked up on that side of just like savage sarcasm. And so when he did it like on the spot, I was just like, oh my gosh. But yeah. So
me and him have hit it off. We're like getting to be really good friends.
Yeah.
Like I actually talked to him for like an hour on the phone the other night. And literally a month ago, I wouldn't even have said, I would have said I knew who he was, and that was it. He said hi to me because we started next to each other at Big Sugar last year. Besides that, I had never talked to him until, I mean, like we've been talking about him on the podcast a lot just because he's been putting in these massive hours. And then after I called him out about his massive hours, that was when we like connected, and we've just hit it off. Like actually, like I think I don't know, there's like a genuine friendship starting to develop there, which is kind of cool.
That's fantastic. And however much that random phone call helped that progression, I'm really happy to be a part of that. So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk real quick just about the Bonk Bros. And I kind of want to, before we get to like zero to hero, I think by this point my listeners know I've had Adam on, I've had Dylan on, I had Tyler's episode dropped today, which is June 28th. Yours will probably drop in about 2 weeks. Scott seems to be the kind of white whale of trying to get him on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of people,
all 5 of us.
Yeah. We're closing in, and so like there's definitely some tangential pieces with this show, you know, and I always jokingly tell people like the Stable Cyclist Podcast has been mentioned more on the Bonk Bros than any other podcast, and you guys typically don't name drop, but it's happened about 3 or 4 times now. It's actually what got Tyler onto this show because of the Bonk Bros Domestique reference. And how did you come to be a part of that show? Because we talk about the National Hockey League has the original 6 teams, and you're not one of the original 3. The original 3 were Adam, Dylan, and Scott. At what point did you get pulled in, and how did that come about? And how did you go from like maybe a substitute member to I'm there every week, boys?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure originally I just invited myself on because we had already started the Matchbox. And I was like, how could you guys start a podcast without me? Like, what are you guys doing? Like, I thought we were friends. Like, what the heck? And so I'm pretty sure the first time I was on, I literally was like, I'm coming on this week. And Dylan sent me the link, and I basically just showed up. And it was kind of like an every other week thing at first. And then this is going to sound really bad, but I felt like when I was on the podcast, I brought like I don't know, I just made it a little bit more exciting. Like I brought like a randomness or sporadic kind of, I don't know, some flair, I guess, maybe for better or for worse. And then I got in trouble because like there were a couple episodes where I was talking maybe a little too much beef, and it kind of backfired on me a little bit. And so for a couple months, I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. This is unhealthy. I can't control my tongue, pretty much, was what I had to say. I just, in a setting like that, and it still happens now, I'll be totally honest. You get into a setting with your, 4 best virtual friends, and you get just talking, and you kind of forget that, like, a lot of people are going to hear this. And if you talk crap about somebody, the person you talk crap about is 100% going to hear it because somebody's going to send it to them. And I always forget that. Like, I always forget it. So I had to like take a little break there and say like, all right, I need to like tone it down a bit. And now I'm back on every week. Cause honestly, it's like a lot of fun. Like I look forward to it every week when we record, because
Yeah.
it's just like an hour and a half of us cracking up with each other, so it's turned into like this kind of thing that we actually look forward to every week, and it's turning into like this popular thing, which I think we've said this before, but even if it wasn't popular, I think we'd still be doing it, because like we've all kind of embraced that it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to circle back to that in a little while. Yeah. So Drew, you are mainly a cyclocross crit guy in the past, and you are kind of making the transition to the long to the long stuff. And tell us, we usually the first thing out of the chute, and we went in a different direction today, but usually the first thing we do out of the chute is like, what is your kind of zero to hero story? Or when I'm talking with someone like you, who you are a professional cyclist, I don't ride bikes to, hey, I'm holding a pro license, kind of how did that happen? And I know there's definitely some college competing in there and some a lot of success in there. But yeah, kind of give us your zero to hero story, I guess, Drew.
Yeah. I got into bikes around the age of like 10 or 11. Mom worked at a bike shop. She was an accountant. I ended up like hanging out with all the bros back in the bike shop part of it. And so they just eventually got a mountain bike. They would take me out mountain biking. A couple years later, a junior team here in Louisville had started up. So they kind of recruited me to the junior team. That was when I had only ever ridden or raced mountain bikes for the first couple years, and then they showed me what cross and road racing was, and it turned out that I was, as a young kid, it was pretty good at cyclocross. So that was the one that I immediately kind of fell in love with right off the bat. Within like 2 years of racing cyclocross, I was already into that 17, 18 age group, and was going to Europe for European blocks of racing and the world championships. And that's all as like a 16, 17-year-old. And then
that was with the national team you were doing that?
Yeah. Jeff Proctor it was kind of like his own thing. At the time, it wasn't associated with USAC. So we would just race our normal team kit. And then a month later, we would go back for Worlds, and that was with the national team. But I think eventually he did start to work with USAC. And so, but yeah, when I did it, it was just like he would take like 10 or 15 juniors over to Europe to get us experience racing all the Christmas block of cyclocross races. So super fun. It seemed like even as a first year junior, really like my first or second time going to Europe, I adapted pretty quickly to racing over there as a junior, and got a couple good results as a junior. My second year as a 17, 18 junior, Vanderpool won, Wout van Aert was second, Quentin Hermans was third, like all these hitters that are in the world tour now. And I was 13th, I think. So at the time I was thinking like, all right, I wasn't that far off, pretty close. But then the graduation in the U23s was a little harder. And I always joke, but I kind of feel like my trajectory has been, I got really good from the time I was like 15 to 18. And then I've kind of just stayed, like it was like a super fast up. And now it's just been like, not a plateau, but a very slow grind ever since I was 18. Like even Chase had said like, oh yeah, Drew won some collegiate national championships. But like, first of all, collegiate nationals isn't super competitive if you didn't know that. Yeah, so it's just been like a long grind, and I wouldn't have really considered myself like a pro racer until maybe this year. The way I had always defined pro racing was you're making money from racing, and this should be the first year that I'll make money from racing, if I don't spend it all on budget, which it doesn't look like I will. So that's good. That's kind of how the privateer thing is. It's like, all right, I'm going to get this sponsorship money lined up, and that's what I have. And if I don't spend it all, whatever's left over is my quote unquote salary. And so I've tried to with that in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to save as much money as possible. I've almost gotten into every race I've done this year for free because I'm trying to leverage, hey, I'm going to do a YouTube video on this race. So that's good for you and it's good for me. So can you kick me back a free reg? And a lot of times people will say yes. So that saves me money that I don't have to spend on my budget. So yeah, it's been working out pretty well so far, but I guess that's the quick rundown. Obviously there's a lot in between there.
Yeah, no, it's all good. You did say you are doing the privateer thing this year. And I know through the fall last year, you were really hoping to get in the Lifetime Grand Prix and you didn't, but you're still chugging ahead with this privateer.
Chase took my spot, dude. I'm telling you. I thought it was going to be me or him. If you looked at the comments, when they said that they were going to make the final, somebody had dropped out and they were going to bring in a new rider. If you look at the comments on that post, it was 50-50 Chase comments or Dizzle comments. And they went with him. And I was and in hindsight, I was kind of happy for him because it seemed like he wanted it more than me, to be quite honest.
Yeah. No, that just adds to the myth of the beef between you two that makes it even better. So
he stole my spot. That's exactly what happened. Yep.
Yeah. So, one thing Chase and I talked about, I have another interview coming out soon that we talked about it on. I talked about it with Tyler a little bit is, in a situation like this, it's easy to see. You really want to get into the Lifetime Grand Prix and you don't. And so much of the time our identity gets tied up in whatever thing we're trying to achieve or whatever we're trying to do. And we sometimes can lose sight of or we maybe don't have the people around us. Tyler talked about, I have friends who don't even understand what this means, so they don't really care. And I know Taylor Ladine has said the same thing. He's they do not care about bike racing, and it's really grounding. And so for you, how do you, in that disappointment, I didn't make Lifetime Grand Prix, but I'm trying to do this pro bike race thing. How do you make sure you stay grounded and, where does your identity kind of end up lying? I guess let's just start there and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me this. So I've had some time to think about it. I talked a little bit about identity last summer because I had broken my wrist and, that hit me pretty hard. I had been training pretty hard for some crit racing and road racing and I broke my wrist. The race before I had broken my wrist, I had won. So I'm all right, the form is there. I'm rolling into the main part of the season, pro Nats, amateur Nats, Tulsa, all these races that I had on my calendar. So then I break my wrist at the first race at Tulsa. So then I'm out for 6 weeks. And that basically had ended the crit racing for that year. Because by the time I could have raced some crits, it was already the end of the season. And so I had pretty much told the Roadhouse team, I'm out for the rest of the year. And so that gave me plenty of time to think about this sucks not being able to ride my bike. But I feel really fortunate in that long before that had happened, my identity was found in something way more solid than that. And I would say that's my faith. And I think that that's really important just because cycling can get taken away from you. Of course, I only had it taken away for, 5-6 weeks. Not a big deal. I got right back into it, was racing a few months later. But it could very well be that I could crash and never be able to ride again or something like that.
Yeah. And
if cycling was the only thing that my identity hinged on, that'd be dangerous. That would be, what now? Right. But that would never be the case for me. If I were to go out today and break my leg, never be able to ride my bike again, I'd probably be packing my bags and going to be a missionary somewhere and totally doing something like that. I could see that happening right off the bat. Or doing something along those lines. I have this this whole other part of me that can never be taken away no matter what happens. And so when I was coming back from that injury, I did actually a YouTube video on the mental side of recovery. And one of the things I talked about that in that video was identity. And there's actually research that talks about this thing called the multifaceted identity, I think is what it's called. And it means just having more in life. Like, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Like, have different focuses and priorities and kind of different parts of your life, so that the more faceted you are, the more you have to fall back on if one of those things goes away. So if cycling goes away, you can have your faith, you can have family, friends, maybe another hobby, just something. But if everything's in on cycling, then it'd be really hard for you to deal with a setback like that. So for me in my faith, one verse that stands out a lot to me that I've had memorized for a long time is Galatians 2:20. It says, "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." And I think that sums it up pretty well. The life that I'm now living is totally identified in and through Christ. And the neat thing about that is that I can absolutely be a bike racer and a podcaster and a dad and a husband and a coach and do all of that with my identity in Christ and for his glory. My favorite Bible verse is Colossians 3:23, which says, "Everything you do wholeheartedly as something done for the Lord and not for man." And I love that verse because it says everything you do. Or I think maybe even some verses say, or some versions might say, whatever you do. It doesn't say like if you're a pastor or if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer. It just says like whatever you do. So to me, that's bike racing. That's podcasting. That's husband, father, fill in all the stuff that I do. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it for the glory of God and not for man. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, because it also says to do it wholeheartedly. So a lot of my motivation and focus and drive kind of comes from that verse and that identity.
Yeah. How long has that been a big part of your life, Drew? Is that something you grew up with, or has always felt a part of your life, or was it at some point you just kind of were awakened to this reality for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was actually through cycling. When I got onto that junior team, Red Zone Cycling, the family that helped run that team, they were Christians and went to church, and the team captain had a son that was the same age as me, and I ended up being like best friends with him. And so I would hang out, spend the night at their house. Like, it seemed like some summers in high school, I was spending more time at their house than my house, because like I was just such good friends with them. So just from being around them as much as I was, it just started to rub off on me. I think I started going to church with them occasionally. And eventually they got me a Bible and read with me a couple passages from Romans and explained to me like, Drew, you're a sinner. Like, you might think you're going to heaven, but unless you believe in Christ, like that ain't happening. But the good news about us being sinners is that Christ came to save sinners. And so they showed me that in the book of Romans. They read with me Romans 6:23, which says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is life through Jesus Christ." And so then they asked me if I, like, straight up, they just said, "We want you to be a Christian. Do you want to be a Christian?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I do." So they gave me that Bible. That Bible had some like devotionals in it. I started just like powering through all those devotionals and reading. And I kind of joke, but like in high school, I remember waking up. I had to take a bus. I had to take 2 buses to get to school. And my first bus picked me up at like 6:30. And in high school, I was waking up at 5:30 and reading my Bible. And I'm like, I look back on that, I'm like, what was wrong with me? Like, who does that? And like I don't even know if like I would do that now. I'm like, dang. So I don't know. Not to like. If I just like look back and I'm kind of impressed at my dedication to doing that. Kind of seems like, yeah, I don't even know what was happening there. God was growing me, I guess.
Yeah.
And then eventually I got plugged in. So that was around when I was like 16, 17 years old. And then they lived on the other side of town, so it wasn't as easy as like just joining their church and going to church with them because it was on the other side of town. And so eventually a friend of mine that lived closer to me had invited me to the church that me and my wife now go to. So I got plugged in there, got really close to the pastor. He's basically been, like a father figure for me the last basically 15 years. And so just through all of that, my faith has just grown tremendously. But all of it started in high school.
Right on. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Bonk Bros podcast that you would continue to do it, you guys would, even if there weren't a huge following, right? And even if you weren't like publishing stuff, because they've just gotten to be your friends. Mm-hmm. And I want to kind of transition from the identity piece to something that keeps coming up. Chase and I talked about it on that pod, but I've had other pros as I talked to them, pre and after the interviews, discussing the life that you live as this privateer can be pretty lonely. And it's hard. You were really excited a little bit ago about like, yeah, Chase and I are like becoming actual friends. And that's, people need to understand how valuable that is. And like, I know for a fact that's genuine excitement from you and from him, because the lifestyle you guys are trying to live, even though you chose it, is lonely. And it's hard when you go to races and like the people that you maybe should be being friends with, you're trying to kill each other, and the people that maybe can help you answer questions about sponsorship or about how to do X, Y, and Z, like it's all super guarded because like you're all competing for the same pie essentially. And that leads to this life where you just aren't as tight as you should be. And so, why do we need community? And why is things like the Bonk Bros, and yeah, it's a podcast and you let everybody in on it. And in that way, you're also building community. But why are those things so important, and why are they so hard to find in this realm of what you're doing in your eyes?
Yeah. The Bonk Bros is a neat thing because we rarely see each other in person. Like I hadn't hung out with Adam or Tyler in person in a long while, and they came, they were both at the Mid-South this year. That's literally the only time I've seen either one of them at all in 2024 was in person, was at the Mid-South. We all met up there except for Scott. But then Scott and Dylan I'll catch at some races here and there. So like I rarely like spend time with these people in person, but like we talk all throughout the week through our group text. We do a 90-minute podcast together every week. That's basically just us hanging out. And so I joke and say that these are like my 4 best virtual friends, but like that's really what they are. Like I'm not going out and having burgers with these guys on the weekends. Like I get to hang out with them once a week and it's on my computer, which is kind of like a weird setting to have close friends, but that's how it's happened. And it's genuine. Like we're all really good friends, but we just don't hang out that often. But I think it's really important. And for me, I listened to the podcast with Chase, and when he talked about loneliness, I felt for him, and like immediately was like, bro, I'll be your friend. Like, I'm like, I can't believe there's people like this, like that don't have enough people to hang out with. I've never been in that spot. I'm just being totally upfront. And I don't want to like turn this into the evangelical Christian episode, but that's kind of what it's gonna be, because that's why. That's the reason why I've not hit any loneliness, is because I have decided to base my life in Fairdale, Kentucky, so that I can stay rooted and plugged in at my local church, which is called First Baptist Church Fairdale. And I've got all of these friendships that I've been growing and developing for over a decade with other guys, with my pastor. So like I feel super rooted right here. And so to convince me to move out of this place would take a whole lot, because I've been developing these relationships for so long. It'd be hard to like pick up and move and find that somewhere else. And so, yeah, like Fairdale, Kentucky might not be the best place to live as a cyclist. I'm literally the only cyclist that lives in this little town. But it works, like it gets the job done, and I have that community. I hear all the time, like these other guys that are Christians and they're racing bikes. There are a handful of us in the gravel peloton. And I think that is a big thing that a lot of guys lack, is that it's like, you know, I've just chosen to like maybe like orient my life a little bit more around that community instead of cycling. And I think in the grand scheme of things is like a little bit of a healthier choice. Because if you were to orient your whole life around cycling, exactly what you're talking about, like the only people that you're going to be around are people at bike races on the weekends. And it is kind of like that mixed, like these are competitors. You know, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's like a, you know, word vomit of everything that I'm kind of thinking, but I'm grateful and super glad that I've got those relationships totally. It's almost like I have a home life and a bike life, and those two things almost don't overlap. They don't overlap that often. And when I'm home, I feel plugged in and healthy and involved, and then I just kind of go away and do the bike thing on the weekends. But I'm coming back to a community here, which I guess maybe a lot of other cyclists just don't have. That is kind of what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and like you don't need to feel apologetic about being like token Christian guy on here. Like I have had anybody and everybody across the spectrum, both religiously and politically. Like your story matters, and this is a huge part of your story, just like everybody else who's been a guest on here matters, and they have other parts of their story that not everybody may like, and that's okay, but it's who they are, and this is who you are. And so like you don't need to apologize for who you are. And I wouldn't have brought you on if I didn't really value who you are as a human being either. So I think there's incredible guidance in there, even if people don't feel religious ties, that you do need to find a community outside of the bike world. Because the bike will ultimately, you know, if you have, like you said, you have an accident that takes it away from you, then what? And that can be really challenging. That's going to be challenging even if you have that other community, but if you don't, you're really in trouble. So yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned you're on a different podcast called The Matchbox, and I think some people that listen to this one may know what the Matchbox podcast is, but they may not. And the Matchbox leads into us talking about your coaching business. And so I want to start by talking, like, what is the Matchbox podcast, Drew? And then how does it tie? Because it is like literally the podcast of your business. So take us through that.
Yeah, the Matchbox was a podcast that me, Dylan Johnson, and Adam Sabin all started. It was just a way for us to market our coaching. Me and Dylan started Ignition in 2021. He had called me in 2020, was asking about coaching because he was about to leave CTS and he knew that I was coaching kind of on my own. And we were loose friends at the time, had just kind of known each other from racing some mountain bike stuff against each other. So he called me up and had asked me some advice on like, what's it look like to do your own coaching, not for a company. So I kind of told him everything that I had learned through the process. And then at the end of the call, I was like, man, me and you should like partner up. I mean, like, you've got this awesome marketing tool that we could leverage, your channel on YouTube. So like we could absolutely like partner up and do something. And I thought about it. And then eventually I was like, we should start a coaching company, and our niche, like within the coaching world, would be like our coaches are fast. Like our coaches are racers. And a sub goal behind that was like, for me personally, I wouldn't be able to race my bike at the level that I have the last 7-8 years if it wasn't for coaching. Because coaching gave me the flexibility, but also the income that I needed to like keep living and still be able to train and travel and go to these races and make these connections and all of that. Like I didn't have to give up racing, which was awesome. And I was like, if we could find other young people who are in that same situation, like they're not making a ton of money from racing, if any, and maybe they have what it takes to like make it in this sport. They just don't have enough income to keep doing it. They're out of college and they've got to choose, like, I'm going to quit and do the normal, I guess I don't know, normal's not bad either, but they're going to quit racing at a high level to do something else because they have to pay the bills. And so if we could say, hey, you would make a good coach, we'll train you up to be a good coach, and you can keep racing and see if you can make it as a racer. So that was kind of our goal when we started it. And obviously behind all of that is like, we want to be good coaches for the athletes we coach as well. But the reason we named it Ignition Coach Co., which I don't think there's any other companies calling themselves a coach company, it's because we believe that like if the coach thrives, the whole company is going to thrive. And so that's our focus, is like we want to develop our coaches and put the emphasis on the coaches. That's why we didn't call it training systems or anything like that. It's called Ignition Coach Co. So there is some purpose behind that. So yeah, and then the Matchbox was just a podcast that we started to show that off or showcase that. And the idea was just that we were going to talk about training concepts or training ideas, and just give our coaching experience from that. So they're not like, of course, Dylan is basically a walking database. And so there definitely is a science perspective of it, because somehow he just has like thousands of research articles memorized. And so having him on the podcast is a huge asset, because he can draw from all that research and that science. But a lot of times it's just like our coaching intuition, if you want to call it that, that we've just learned from our own experiences over the years, or coaching athletes. And so we're just taking that experience and answering. Now, all we do is answer listener questions, but occasionally we'll kind of bounce around like topics that we're interested in.
So, Drew, how many coaches are working for you currently, or work within your company?
Yeah, we're up to just over 20 coaches now. I think 21 total, which is a lot. But like I said, a lot of them are racing and have other things on their plate besides coaching. There's only a few that are making coaching their primary job. And so it really is kind of like a filler of like, we got a bunch of guys who are racing, and so they might be making some money from racing. And then we got some other guys like Adam and Tyler who have what I would say pretty sweet other jobs, like that are flexible enough to where they can do that and they can coach. And so that's what Adam and Tyler both do. They've got quote unquote real jobs, but their real jobs are so awesome that they can also coach alongside that. So we get a lot of people that are like that, where they can do a couple different things. So they might not have like a whole coaching roster. They maybe only have like 10 athletes or something like that.
This past winter, you did a new intake of coaches. And you mentioned earlier, we train them up, we teach them so that we're all everybody has their own style, but generally we're all pointing the ship in the same direction. What does that training look like? You don't have to give us any of the nuts and bolts of it, but what are you taking people through generally to get them all on the same page?
Yeah. There's not like a curriculum that you can buy online for how to train a cycling coach. So we literally just made our own. Me and Dylan have just developed a couple different sessions that we run through all of our new coaches. So that's how we like to do our hiring in batches. So the last batch we did was just a couple months ago, and we brought on 5 new coaches all at once. And we like to do those in person. So it's 5 2-hour sessions. And so it ultimately ends up being 10 hours of training that we spend with these new coaches, which isn't a lot, but it's enough to get them a foundation of this is what we're all going to operate from. And then beyond this, we're all doing, and I think all of our coaches are learning and teaching themselves, because most of them are racers. So they're just naturally interested in training and racing and all that stuff. So a lot of them come in with a bunch of experience, but yeah, we do that all not in person, but virtually. But it's not like a recording that we do. I'm talking to these guys for 2 hours at a time, because I also at the same time want to get to know them and build that relationship with them. So that's 10 hours of me kind of training them, but it's also 10 hours of me trying to build that initial relationship with them so that they can feel comfortable talking to me and coming back to me with questions, or calling me up and saying, hey, I got this athlete this is going on and just wanted to get your opinion on this, or whatever. So that's kind of what it looks like. Within those sessions, we talk about the first thing we talk about is communication. And I like to say that communication is the black hole of coaching. I don't think coaches nowadays are getting fired because of poor training plans that they're writing. I think it's probably, if a coach is getting fired, I'd say most of the time it's got something to do with the communication is off for some reason. So we hit that pretty hard in session 1. Session 2 is a lot about the different training protocols. We talk a lot about periodization. I'd say that our primary focus as far as how to train an athlete kind of revolves around periodization. And then we talk about strength training. We talk about sports psychology. We talk about training peaks, just how to use training peaks. Yep. And then we also give all of our coaches a little bit of business advice of you might want to get an LLC and you might want to get a business bank account and do all that stuff because they are in essence running their own coaching company under the umbrella of Ignition. So they do still need to be pretty organized when it comes to the business or the tax side of things. And so the whole goal for all those training sessions is for me to help them learn everything that I had to learn on my own getting into this.
Sure.
Help them kind of get over those hurdles a little easier than I had to.
And you were originally Adam's coach, correct?
Well, originally
or
me
you
and
coached
Adam,
him for a while?
Yeah, that was after we had started Ignition. And he was already coaching with us, and then he asked me to coach him. Or no, that's wrong. You're right. I did coach him. You're right. Yeah. That was Caitlin. Sorry, I'm getting them confused. I coached Caitlin. Caitlin became a coach, And then Caitlin Maddox asked me to coach her.
Everyone just saw like my level of research on a podcast versus the Bonk Bros level of research on a podcast.
You are absolutely right. I did coach Adam for about 2 years, and then I wasn't coaching him for a couple months. And literally, this is like, some people believe in, not karma. What's it called? Where just crazy stuff happens. I don't know. I call it providence. This is providence. Adam was getting like asked by another coaching interview company to come and work for them. And so he calls me up like out of the blue. I'm driving to a race, I think. And he's like, hey man, I just wanted to pick your brain because I got this coaching company trying to recruit me and I'm thinking about doing it. And I was like, hold on, buddy. Me and my buddy Dylan are starting a coaching company and we're looking for like our first 2 recruits. Scott McGill was living with Dylan at the time, so that was an easy recruit because Dylan could like literally like talk to him because they lived together. So that was an easy kind of risk-free first recruit. And then Adam called me and I was like this is going to be a risk. Like we don't even know if this is going to work, but here's what it would look like if we did. And so he thought about it for like a week or 2 and then he's like, all right, I'm in. And so Adam and Scott were our first 2 coaching recruits. And so we literally like created these training sessions and they were like the guinea pig for all of it. We were like, all right, we're going to try this. And we think we're going to get a QuickBooks account. Like we need to buy a website next week. But those 2 guys were with us through all that, like just figuring it out like day by day. So it's crazy to think that was 3 years ago. And now there's 20 coaches. And those 2 guys trusted us enough at the start to do that. But yeah, I don't even remember what the original question was about. I
don't either. It doesn't matter.
That's something to do with Adam.
How did you and Dylan connect? Like, how did you know each other? To the point where you were like, let's run a business together.
Yeah. No, I legit had a very serious conversation with my wife. And my wife was like, is this guy going to screw us over? And I had to say, I don't know. Like, I don't know him well enough to know if this is going to be a good partnership or a not so good partnership. But from what I could tell, it seemed like a good idea. It seemed like me and him were jiving well enough to where this could actually work. Little did I know that like 3 years later, we'd be like best friends. So not only do we start the company together, but like now we're actually like best friends. So it's like, like that's pretty cool. But that wasn't like that when we started. Not at all. Like I barely even trusted him enough to do this. But I needed him because like it was his channel that we were going to leverage to market the company. And if it weren't for his channel, I mean, I don't know if it would exist, at least in the way that it does right now, right? Like, because he has that following. So, I mean, originally it started with that phone call. I remember him calling me right in the middle of the pandemic, like everything was shut down. So there wasn't any racing going on. So I hadn't seen him that whole year at 2020, but before then we had just raced each other at the NUE mountain bike races. And a lot of times it was just like us hanging out at the podium awards because he was always winning the 100 mile and I was oftentimes winning the 100K, the shorter distance. And so there were a lot of races where we were just kind of hanging around each other. We got to race against each other at a couple of them, like Mohican. At Mohican, they start the 100 mile and the 100K together. So I remember racing him a few times at that race where we raced for 50 miles and then we split to go separate ways. But yeah, it wasn't a strong relationship until we started the company, and then slowly but surely we just started growing closer and closer together. Yeah. Like I remember going to his house and being nervous, like knocking on the door and I'm like, man, I never hung out with this guy outside of a bike race. And here we are starting a company together and I'm on his front porch. And I'm like, this guy could be a jerk. And He answers the door, and it was like, yeah.
Yeah, it totally makes sense you would be intimidated going there. I mean, at the time, and like, he has 250,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh,
so that's a whole lot more than you and I's accounts combined times a lot. And so his, like you said, his audience is just so huge, and it's a loyal audience. And so it was that was a big step to get him to bring you together and then move forward with it. So incredible.
I will say this. I was super nervous standing on the front porch. As soon as I walked into his house and saw how messy it was, I was like, some of that nervousness went right away. I'm like, this guy's a bum. Like who is this? Like, it wasn't at all what I was expecting. Like, you see his YouTube channel and how like dialed it is, and you're like, this guy's going to have like everything organized, and like he's going to be living in this nice house, and he's like straight up college life in it down there in Brevard. Like, I walked into his living room, and there's boxes everywhere. There's wheels everywhere. There's like sealant on the floor. He's got like these couches that look like they're from the Goodwill. You're like, not at all what I was expecting. By the end of the weekend, I'm like, this guy's just another guy. Like, I had this big, like this big image of him from his YouTube channel. And within 2 days, I'm like, he's a normal dude. Like,
you had broken it all down.
Yeah, exactly. He showed me his studio, and I'm like, this is it? Like, this is really where you record your videos? And I'm like, this is embarrassing, dude. It's like in a shack behind his house. Like, you've got to climb over an old lawnmower just to get to the spot where he records his videos. And I'm like, it made him so much more human to me that I'm like, oh yeah. I don't need to be intimidated by this guy.
Yeah. Well, and if people wonder why you and him are best friends, but yet have like so much beef, it's, gravel beef. It's because of what you just heard. Like, you're willing to just savagely take him down. And all of that, like everything you just said is public. Like, it's been on Bonk Bros many times. And so, it's an
interesting friendship.
For sure. I'm sure it is.
But it's a strong one. I think he would agree.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Drew, that when I had him on, and you and I will have this conversation later off air, but I always ask my guests, like, rank me like 2 or 3 people that I should have on this show that have interesting stories. And no hesitation, your name was the first one out of his mouth. And he said he's a really, really close friend of mine, and his story is amazing. So, like, It is true that you two are very, and like,
wow.
The reason I would tell you that, like, he is so well connected with so many people, and he could have said anybody, and he picked you because you truly are that person to him. You are a really tight friend with him. And so, it's all good stuff, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for telling me that.
Yeah, of course.
To tear up a little bit now.
Yeah, well, in the whole world. And maybe I can, like, bring some Chase Wark style gravel beef right out and dry you back up here. But no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
We always end on some lighter stuff, partly because sometimes we get really serious for a while. This has been really good for the most part today, but I always end with a couple lighter questions at the end. And one of them is, if I come to visit you, and it doesn't have to be in Kentucky where you are right now, but let's say you and I are together and we can ride gravel anywhere in the United States, where are we going to do that?
Yeah, I heard you ask Chase this one, and I had to think about it for a long time. And I forget what I thought.
And you can't tell me a cyclocross course. Like, I know that the easy question for me would be like, what European World Cup course is the best? And
that
I
would
know
be
you
good.
Pull that out of a holster. So maybe we'll start there, and then you can tell me about the gravel.
Honestly, I haven't ridden a lot of gravel in places other than just going to the race and doing the race.
Sure.
If it wasn't gravel, like if you just said, let's go on a bike ride, I would say like, let's roll down to Townsend, Tennessee, which is right outside of Knoxville. That's kind of my training grounds where I'll go on, like, if I've got a 4 or 5 day block where I can get away and do some training. That's always where I go. But most of it, there is one kind of cool gravel route down there. but it's mostly paved. But it's just these big climbs and very low traffic, and yeah, just
Is that where you also do the
beautiful.
gravel, or is that where you also do the training camp for Ignition?
Yeah. Yep. Same place. That's where I originally got introduced to that place through college at Marian University. That's where we would go for spring break. So I got to get familiar enough with the area during college to where I felt comfortable taking other people down there. And I've been down there a lot since college just to explore everything that's down there. Like I said, there's not a ton of gravel down there, but there is a little bit. So that would be like the first thing that I would think of, just because I love it there. I've dreamed,
right
if you know like a little bit about me, you know about the DIY stuff I do, and I've dreamed of buying like a little patch of forest up in the mountains and literally building like a tiny home, like 100% me building it not off the grid, but me building it. And it hasn't happened, but that's where I would do it. It would be right there in Townsend, Tennessee.
All right. So the second question is, and you wouldn't have heard this in the Chase interview unless you watched he and I's donut ride, which is a separate video.
Okay.
If you and I are on this bike ride and we are 4 hours in, my favorite thing to do 4 hours in or 5 hours in is stop at a gas station. And I love a good gas station stop. And what are you getting at this gas station stop 4 to 5 hours into our ride?
I've thought this through and I've done some research. And this is where I've landed. The most calories per dollar would be the iced honey bun. It's like the cheapest thing that you can find in a gas station, and it's the most calorie dense for the price that you pay. And it's like all carbs. So the iced honey bun would be right there at the top of the list. But I mean, like, I love donuts. I know Chase probably said donuts, and I think maybe that's why we're such good friends, but I love donuts as well. I did RAGBRAI one year with some friends, and our team name was called the Drunken Donuts, and our jersey was just a bunch of donuts all over it. So yeah, I'm a big donut guy.
What are you getting to drink in this gas station?
That's a good question too. What's my go-to gas station drink? I like a good root beer, like Barks. Some Barks is really good. If they got the red cream soda, I've gotten the double, like the Barks root beer and the Barks red cream. Yeah, I like that.
All right.
I love soda.
All right.
It's dangerous. Yeah, I could drink soda every day.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Awesome. Well, Drew Dillman, thank you for fitting this in. This has been amazing to get to hear more of who you are, even down to the core of who you are, and what you're doing with your company and how you're helping people and bringing people together. And yeah, I really appreciate your time today, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Can I flip it on you and ask, like, where'd you come from? Like, I remember Adam and Nina saying, hey, can we send this guy a hat? And I'm like, who is this guy? Why are we sending him a hat?
Gosh.
And
they
were both like, oh, he's
that.
starting a podcast and this, that. And I'm like, all right, we'll send him a shirt and a hat. Like, no sweat. And then after that, I didn't really hear your name for a while. And then it seems like in the last 6 months, it's just like blown up about it seems like you're getting, like you said, a lot of the people that I'm friends with, you're interviewing. So then I just have a natural interest to want to listen to those podcasts. But like, yeah, what was your ambition with starting all this?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher for a living. That's my main gig. And
high school, middle school?
Yep. Yeah, high school.
What English?
I used to teach English as a second language. I taught that for a long time.
Nice.
And then our community is really diverse, 2,500 people and like 50% non-white. So it's an awesome place to live and experience the world. And and then in the last few years, I've shifted over into social studies. I teach 7th grade civics now, which is it's a trip. And then I teach a content creation class, which some of this stuff we're doing is I teach kids how to do it. And then I teach a leadership class. So, yeah. But in 2020, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder and, kind of started picking up the pieces that were my life and putting them back together. And I've always dabbled in video stuff. And in 2023, I started to work with, like in January of 2023, I started working on a documentary with another filmmaker in the area called Back to the Start. And the whole premise of the film was how to like restart your life after a serious mental health diagnosis. And so as we were working on that project, I also started this channel. I started putting out a lot of mental health content, but mainly specific to the bike world. And the plan for that was always that in year 2, I would start a podcast that would also be a part of all of that. And so, yeah, you got that email from Nina and Adam, and that was right around, okay, I got to back up. How Adam and I met. We were starting to work on, like, eventually when we finished this documentary, which was supposed to end with me getting to the start line of the Mater 100 last year.
Yes.
And so I was starting to work with people on when this documentary's done, we're going to want to premiere it in places throughout the Midwest. And I was looking for a Sioux Falls contact, and Adam Sabin was the only person I had any inkling of connection with in Sioux Falls. And that was through the Bonk Bros podcast and the Matchbox. So I just reached out blind to Adam and was like, here's this project I'm working on. Would you consider, can you help connect me in Sioux Falls so we can do a premiere eventually? And he came back with, I'll help you with that. I will also coach you. And I will coach you for free.
Right. I thought that's what, I was like, I'm pretty sure he coached you, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and at first, I have a ton of experience coaching, multiple sports. I've also worked with marathoners trying to make the Olympic trials. I get the game, when I listen to Matchbox, I'm always trying to keep up or be well, maybe I would do this or whatever, I geek out on that kind of stuff. And so I was kind of why do I need somebody to coach me? And then my wife was he's going to do it for free. Just take the relationship on. And so Adam and I started working together. Nice. He and Nina email you about send this guy swag, and that swag never showed up. And it never showed up. And it never showed up. And I was
eventually,
okay.
Right?
Eventually. So
yeah, okay, good.
Eventually I type out this email to you and I'm like, hey dude, I never got anything. And I didn't know you had just broken your wrist. And
so
no.
I should have sent it to you months before that. That's what happened. I usually send all that stuff out in batches, every 2 months. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but it just cracked me up because I had sent this follow-up, and you were I'm sure poking it out with one hand, and you were I just broke my wrist, I'll get it out tomorrow. And then it showed up. Well, 2 days after it showed up, I was in a really bad mountain bike accident.
Okay.
Lost consciousness, and I wasn't really able to resume training or even riding until around May 1st this year.
Wow.
It was a bad one. I had to relearn how to swing my right arm when I walked and all kinds of weird stuff. So yeah.
How did I not hear
January,
about that? Dang.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
But yeah. And in the meantime, I made a film about that Mater 100 from last year called Mater that is out on YouTube that people can find, because we just took the budget money we had for the documentary and kicked the idea down the road till I got healthy and went and made a film out there. And now we're starting to do other stuff out there as well. So yeah, it's been interesting.
So the original documentary you had set out to do hasn't been completed yet?
It has not been. It's just kind of stalled right now, sitting on a back burner with the intention to finish it. But in the meantime, I've got this channel, and then I got this podcast going, and we're going to continue to talk about mental health in the bike world. It's just my part of the story really isn't getting told yet. I've even had listeners be like, we want to hear your story. They need to listen to the end of this podcast now, obviously. But
okay, good. I kind of assumed that you had already told it, but
no,
I just started.
Here and there,
I've only listened to the last couple of episodes, and so I hadn't heard it.
No, it's all good.
I guess yet.
It's all good.
I think I had heard bits and pieces of it from Adam and stuff, but it's good to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. So eventually Adam and I will kind of resume things again once I'm like training and have like a target. But for right now, we're just kind of like, give me Drew's phone number. Okay.
Nice.
That's more of our relationship.
Can I ask one more question? What?
Yeah, absolutely.
The title, the Stable Cyclist, is a cool title. And I think I know what it means, but I want to hear you tell me what it means.
Yeah, it's a play on words about bipolar.
Okay.
You know, because when you have bipolar, you go through your cycles of like manic and depressive, and you're trying to get it leveled out. And then obviously the channel's also about bikes, and it's about me. So, you know, like there's a lot of meanings in there that all come into play, and that's kind of where it's at. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was specific with bipolar, but I had kind of just had the hunch of like, this guy is getting at like, don't be like the unstable cyclist of like,
right.
I'm going to put my head down and just be lonely and hyper focused and no community, results focused. Like I think of all these just like terrible things that so many people are doing. And I'm like, okay, good. Like this guy's saying there's a better way to do it. Like you don't have to. Well, maybe a lot of people are doing it that way, but there's a better way. You can keep racing bikes. Don't quit biking, but maybe here's a better way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's exactly it. And it's why, you know, I've been really open to having conversations just beyond watts and other stuff, because I'm trying to get people to see like you're trying to get balance in your life, you're trying to get stability in your life, and you do need exercise, but you need a lot of other pieces too to make it work. So yeah, that's how we land there.
Nice. All right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. No problem, man. Thank you. And thanks again for being on. And Drew Dillman, everyone. Thanks for hanging out today and being a part of the podcast. If you've been paying attention over the last few podcasts, you've probably started to realize that community and belonging are a huge idea on people's minds today. Because of that, I want to encourage you to go out to those around you and remind them that you care about them. Remind them that you love them. Because when we know we have people around us, whether it's directly in the cycling community or otherwise, when we know those people around us love us and care about us, this world is a lot less lonely place. The Stable Cyclist Podcast is a weekly-ish show where we talk about bikes, life mentality, and when the occasion arises, we will even talk about mental health. Episodes drop every Friday at midnight if you are listening, and if you are watching, they drop on YouTube at 8 the following morning. Thank you so much for watching or listening today and hanging out with us as Drew and I talk about so many different things. And most importantly, as always, remember, you are loved.